Like George said, we have these issues with animal health, and every morning people in our position get up and read the papers and see what's going on. And if your name's in the paper, you're probably looking for a new job. So we have this concern of how do we find these diseases and how we control our livestock industries and protect them. That's what we're charged with, and it's a major issue, and we are the victims of success. We have had a successful brucellosis program, successful TB program, pseudorabies, scrapie, and as those programs wound down, we began to lose our ID, and we're in that position today of that. And at the same time, we are also facing a reemergence. Brucellosis is kicked back up in the Northwest. TB is jumping here and there around the country. And we have a wildlife interface now. So we have some new issues that we didn't face a few years ago. And it just puts more pressure on us to watch our livestock and protect our industries. And that's not an easy chore without a viable interstate national program. And I am mindful of small producers, and we'll talk a little bit about small producers. New Mexico has a very large contingent of very independent northern New Mexico producers, and they guard their privacy very, very much, but they also understand they got to protect their industry. So we are an independent agency. We are supported 80% by livestock fees, 20% by general fund. That is because our industry supports and knows that they need some help with theft, movement control, and so forth. So we're very fortunate that way. And it's easy for me to stand up here and talk, but I can only stand up here and talk because of the staff we have. Some of you heard Sam Wilson yesterday talk about a little bit more about the brand issues, and those are the people on the ground who make things work. Nothing works, I don't care how good your technology is, until you got somebody on the ground that's doing the job. The other thing that we have in the animal ID department is, when this first started in 04-05, Dr. Parker, who's a professor at New Mexico State, was in extension service, knows everybody in the state, took over as our animal ID coordinator. And Dr. Parker is the one that really takes the brunt of things, and so I get to stand up and talk about the easy stuff, but he was the one out there that had to make the talks, do everything. And we don't have a large anti-program in our state, because our industry understands what we're trying to do. Dr. Parker was able to go out and talk to everybody, and we've left it on pretty much a voluntary issue, so that saved us a lot of issues. We're fortunate, our state has preserved its livestock districts. We have movement control, we have mandatory inspection into the state, mandatory inspection out of the state, mandatory inspection throughout the state. And you have to understand that a lot of cattle, the ones that come to George, I think, move in mass quantities. They move in large lots. And so these are kind of group lot movements that we're talking about. So in state, we tend to move more on the brand than anything else. But we do have a mandatory branding system in our state. As we moved into the animal ID program, we tried to adapt the brand to the modern technologies. The 15-digit 840 brand has not become very popular. We tried the barcode, works really nice until you get some of that green stuff on it, then it kind of breaks down. So we had to kind of get into the more high-techy stuff. And right now, this is kind of what we recognize as a official in the state with our brands. You're going to have a brand plus all of these things. Our 840s and USDA's Bright Tag still works nice. Banks Tag still works nice. So we're kind of into that. As you know, 840s have a premise ID. And we've been a little strict about making sure our producers understand it, because early on we realized that they weren't quite sure what this was all about. So at least the first batch, we get them to them, we talk to them, don't loan them to your neighbors, keep them in your place, do some things like that. And I think that's helped us a lot. We've been able to kind of work through that. The 840 visual, which I know it's not as high-techy, but when you've got 400 heifers to go to Kansas and George says, I'm not taking them until they got ID, all of a sudden an 840 visual tag is really nice at $1 a piece. And we sold a lot of those when we lost our TB status. That was a way to get these animals ID'd and get them moved quickly. And our industry lost very little time with that. So we did another little thing with the state fair, and I know somebody else did it with ID, with the electronic, is we Started with a visual tag this year, tagged all the animals. Our primary purpose was to get them checked into the fair quicker through our inspection service, but it's really been quite popular. The other state fairs have adapted it. And this we may move into an electronic ID system, but for the first year we let everybody kind of start there, and it worked out pretty good. This is still the mainstay of our ID system. We still have a lot of bright tags. We're still doing first point testing supported by industry, which will apparently end about December, and we have to maintain our ID program from there. There's still a lot of vaccinations out there. And we have a state program on bovine trichomoniasis, so we require a USDA tag plus. Our trick tags, as George said, our scrapie system is working quite well. And in the horse, the electronic ID has been kind of popular. We have little clinics, we go around the state, and we attach that to our permanent hauling card in the state. We have by law, if you're going to haul a horse around the state of New Mexico, you must have an inspection. We allow a permanent inspection, or you can get a daily one if you want it, but these are the best deal in town. They're $30 for the life of the horse as long as you own it. So, and it's been updated now, has place with electronic ID, photos, and so pretty popular little deal. Well, some of the things we've had to do over the last couple of years is as TB kind of bumps up here and there, and our friends in Texas are sending us new packages with greetings. Here's 1,000 heifers we sold you out of an infected dairy. So, but we, I just got some of those before I left. But I'm not as bad as poor Bill Hartman. They sent him that and said, but we don't know the IDs of those heifers. So at least we haven't got into that. But we lost our status. And in September 11th and then in March we went back up. Well, that was in September when our cattle are moving. And like I said, all of a sudden, those producers who for years have shipped to Oklahoma and Texas and Kansas had to ID their cattle, and they had to do it quick. So that's where we got a hold of the visual tags. We got out there. And let me tell you, when after 20 years you can't send your cattle to Kansas, a Prem ID is a minor issue. They got them right now, and George, I think Dr. Parker's still digging through Prem IDs. So we, in state though, we backed up. We're low tech, keep it simple, keep it on the brand. And as we move through these different issues, our producers began to realize that within state we're okay. If you're going to go out of state, you're going to have an ID. So we are, and this is kind of unique, but we've got a statute that says we're in charge of all ID. So we're the tag manager for the state. And we handle the tags for our producers, and it's been good, I think, because we've been able to discuss with our producers how they're used, and we've had very little kickback. Today we're in this status. We're like a couple other states. We've got a split state TV status, which is a state within a state, but it allows us to put all our resources in one area, which everybody knows budgets are getting a little tight. So this has really helped us to kind of focus in this area where we know we have problems. We've done risk assessments. We know it's there. So those people inside of that zone have an intimate relationship with us, because if they want to come out of the zone, we've got to inspect them, we've got to test them, we've got to ID them. And so again, when all of a sudden you want to sell your product, a Prem ID is a minor issue. So we've had no pretty big area. It's 2 counties, quite a few areas that we have to get into, and we've tested a lot of cattle. This is just this year, we're up to 90,000 cattle. Everything has a brand plus the metal tags. We have a few exempt herds, purebred herds. We also had to test beef cattle. We're kind of in the process now, like some of the other states have proven we don't have TB. So our northern New Mexico producers have commuter herds. They move back and forth across Colorado. So we establish commuter herd permits, which allows them to test and not have to test for 3 years. So those people stepped up to the plate, got the Prem IDs, so they can move their cattle. So again, when all of a sudden in the source of commerce, you need a Prem ID, it becomes a minor issue, because you're going to move your cattle. We've tested a lot of cattle there. Of course, we haven't found anything. This kind of gives you a little rundown on what we've tested, and you see down at the bottom yaks. And one day I got a call from the inspector, and he says, "Doc, I got these funny looking things out here, and they look kind of like Scottish cattle, but they're black and got more hair." He says, "You don't suppose they're a yak, do you?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, but if they look like a yak and they walk like a yak, that's probably what they are." So sure enough, lady bought some yaks in Arizona because they were going to slaughter them, and she wanted to rescue them. And yaks don't respect fences. They're kind of like buffalo. They just walk through them. So they were about 5 miles away from this lady's place, and she didn't bother to tell us she was bringing them. She didn't bother to test them. She didn't bother to ID them. And so now she's a believer. They've been tested and they've been ID'd. So yeah, they got branded. We have tested a lot of cattle, not finding anything. And as George said, that's a big expense. There are 3 or 4 cases. Texas, we had one. North Dakota, South Dakota have had TB. We can go in, test those herds, not to find anything. We can kind of recently find out where they went, don't find anything, but you can't find out where the TB came from. And that is the issue. We've got to have a better system. So today in New Mexico, we're feeling pretty good, and we're on our 2-year track for free status, and we're just kind of in the surveillance mode. We required exhibition cattle this year to be tested, and we figure that's kind of a high-risk issue. And of course, when I say test, that means official ID, and they're registered with our data bank, so we know where they are. And the 840 tag, both RFID and non, is turned out well. In our dairies, we use the electronic, and we use the USDA's MIM system. This allows us to move through these dairies pretty fast. We have the largest average herd size dairies in the country. Our average herd size is 2,500. We got one dairy up. I think now they're milking 12,000. So we have lots of dairy cows around. We set up a kind of a surveillance system to try to find some ways to minimize the TB issue and not impact our producers too much. And we work this out with our producers. So if you're a really bad guy doing a lot of trading, you're going to get a whole herd test every 4 years on your nickel. We've asked them to test everything in, and in the MA zone, of course, we've got some extra requirements on those cattle. Our auction barns are kind of an integral part of our system. It has maintained its ID through the brucellosis program, but we're going to have to kind of move on that. I want to talk just a second about Mexican steers. I know they go all over the country, and I think there's a lot of misunderstanding with those. There's 2 kinds of Mexican steers was the way we look at it. One is the feeder steer, moves through feeder channels. Usually it's grass, then to a feedlot, and on into the food chain. We don't feel too big of an issue. The other one is the sport cattle. These are the cattle that are pulled out for roping. They tend to be around for a long time. They're going to stick around like this old mother did. We import a lot of cattle in New Mexico, so they're part of our industry. We need them. They come with proper documentation. I spent a lot of time in Mexico working with the veterinarians down there. They work hard to try to keep this program right, and these cattle do come documented. At our ports, we inspect them to wherever they're going and try to notify the states that they're going there. One of the things that people need to understand is Mexican cattle are well identified. If you'll see, these are some cattle with some bad ears, but they've got 2 metal tags and 1 little yellow tag, and those are all Mexican origin tags. The roping industry is a little bit under the, kind of like the backyard racehorse industry. They're a little hard to find, and we have a statute that if you keep them for more than a year, Mexican cattle, they got to be retested. So we're out rooting out these cattle, and we've done a lot of them this year. As much as anything else to prove that these cattle, I think the Mexicans do a good job. You know, we have to remember our test is not perfect, and we in our industry has some bad habits. You can't feed your dairy heifers with Mexican steers. That's basic animal science 101. And I think that's where some of our problems are coming from. And sport cattle have an extended lifespan, so they are higher risk. And we need to kind of get out there and watch those, and that's what we're doing. We did a little project. USDA has said you can't put an 840 tag in a Mexican steer. So they said, well, put a metal bright tag. Well, I have this little issue of putting a New Mexico tag in a Mexican steer and having it show up in Kansas with TB, and I get the blame for it. So we use some 900 tags to kind of go through that. These cattle are well branded. Here's an M branded cow. Here's a steer with its M brand with its state origin, which unfortunately they're allowing them to drop, and then of course it's farm origin. You take a Mexican tag down the border and you hand it to those people, in about 20 minutes they'll tell you where that steer came from. This is the imported steer, and he's properly identified. He has his state origin tag and his import tag. So they come to us with good ID, but our roping people take those IDs out. So we set up a system kind of based on the MIM system. We're doing some testing, recording the data, and you get a nice little printout with the TV MIM system if you've never worked with that. What we found is that the producers will accept these little button tags, these ropers will, and they'll stay with those. And fortunately, Mexico is about to put this tag in these cattle, small button tag, which may hopefully solve a lot of our problems. We did a couple projects just to wind it up. We tried the rumen bolus. It works really nice. Obviously, nobody's going to take it out of there. It's easy to read. FSIS and the slaughter plants don't like it. They think there's an issue with it. So that we knew when these cattle had a rumen bolus, we put a horn brand on them. They're easy to identify. It works out pretty good. What we found out is if you test these Mexican cattle, you get very low response rates. You get very little problems. We did the Opta-brand thing over the last couple of years. It's a nice unit, very labor intensive, and probably too much money. So the point is that these cattle come to us, I think the Mexicans doing the best they can, and we have to improve some of our own practices and educate these people, or try to educate these ropers, which is an interesting oxymoron. So